We open our still, sleep-heavy eyes onto a scene of deep thanksgiving. We see before us a delicious, golden brown, oven-roasted chicken. This tightly stuffed and perfectly prepared chicken is not just any chicken, however. This is a chicken that has the mass density of a rogue planet. This is a chicken whose inside is impossibly larger than its outside. This is a bird whose consumption is entirely speculative because anyone who has attempted to eat their way into this chicken has never been seen or heard from again. No, this is no ordinary bird. This is an engastration where larger birds have been stuffed inside smaller birds, where a turkey is stuffed inside a duck that is stuffed inside a chicken, whose body cavity is as infinitely scaled as it is aromatic. What you have before you is a rare bird indeed. You, on this day of great thanksgiving, stand face to face with a speculative engastration. This is an inverted turducken. Engastration has been with us since the Middle Ages. Engastration is a cooking technique where the remains of one animal are stuffed inside another animal. Martha Stewart and other convicted criminals on the small screen have made one engastration extremely popular in America, the turducken. In the case of a classical turducken, a deboned chicken is stuffed intact inside a deboned duck, which is stuffed intact inside a deboned turkey, each bird incrementally larger than the one with which it is stuffed. This three-bodied architecture forms a center body cavity, technically the body cavity of the chicken, that is excessively stuffed with stuffing. Stuffing, a material so modern and mindless that its name is its action. It is the ultimate modernist, moist bleh. A material so reduced, so stripped, so essentialized, it is simply a something that replaces nothing. In the case of a classical turducken, stuffing is a something that is stuffed into the place where nothing used to be, the empty body cavity. But stuffing has been employed not just in edible bodies. Man has been attempting to stuff stuffing into the quote-unquote useless empty spaces, empty holes all across this land. All the holes, both large and small, deep and wide, holes that are fixed in place, and holes that are on the move, holes that are way out there, and holes that are deep down in here. All the beautiful, powerful holes spread all over this land, man has been attempting to stuff with stuffing. Lest, we've been told, the empty spaces of the world might collapse from the weight of their nothingness, their negative space, their unproductive chaos, their dark energy, forming anarchic vortexes into which all somethings will be sucked. Somethings like macho men and their battleships, for instance. Or so the logic goes. Until the arrival of this blessed new age, it was always man's impulse to stuff stuffing into holes wherever a hole was discovered. Stuffing holes with stuff was an impulse and practice perfected and formalized by modernist man. But never did modernist man ask the vital question, should I stuff this hole with my stuff? Or, what might the manifold consequences of genociding this nothing with my something be? However, who can blame modernist man, who, since he was modernist boy, has been told his something was the very best something? And so he produced a hell of a lot of something until it covered the earth. Modernist man stuffed his something into any hole he could find, edging out nothing, almost to extinction. The radical antimatter to the modernist ontomatter, matter that is the antidote, the blessed undoing of stuffing, and for that matter the undoing of all matter, all somethings, is of course gastric fluid, what we in speculative engastration call the juice. For it is a material that stands radically at the crossroads of presence and absence, at the blurry border wall between being and nothingness, that inscribes the border while problematizing the border, that evidences material dynamism and vitality even as it withdraws into a deeply negative ontology and courageously subtractive action. The juice wins every time when pitted against inert and lame modernist stuffing. But more on gastric fluids later. Gilles Deleuze and Félix Guattari, in their masterwork A Thousand Plateaus, utilized the figure of body without organs to talk about a tabula rasa of sorts. Not exactly a blank slate, not exactly the empty, flat, sterile plane one would find within a modernist framework. Body without organs, as they describe it, is a field of open potentiality, an energy field of desire, a body not yet captured by what they called the strata, not yet formed, not yet coded by the organs, a body, as it were, not yet organized by organs, a body literally disorganized, a body without organs. Some historians believe D&G got this figure, this body without organs, from the very first American Thanksgiving, when native peoples shared a disorganized turkey with their colonizers, their uninvited guests, guests who stole land and bodies. It was not a desire for absolution of their wicked sins that prompted these European settlers to participate on this first Thanksgiving, nor were they looking to promote peaceful cohabitation, as is often the story told us by those who write history books. These Europeans just simply desired the warm feelings of absolution, the warm feelings of peace. These Europeans desired the psychopath's peaciness instead of the actual peacefulness that only comes with lasting and binding peace. Native people understood their colonizers and so prepared an appropriate feast. The first Thanksgiving turkey was killed and emptied of its organs. It was cooked to a perfect, delicious golden brown and presented as the material means of scratching their oppressor's itch. This bird had a distinct flavor of peaciness, comfort food for a job left undone. However, secretly motivated by their flat and radically relational theology, these America's first people disorganized this first Thanksgiving turkey covertly as a prophetic and symbolic critique of the white man's coming organizations of exploitation and oppression. Organizations aimed at extracting maximum profit from the resources and labor of its workforce. This indigenous people served up for their oppressors a simmering symbol of weak power, a delicious feast that was anti-phallic, a scrumptious meal that consisted of a body with no penis, no liver, no kidney, no heart, a body that had a hole in its center that was strikingly the very shape of the New World. A body with no organs. Speculative Engastration advances D&G's body without organs, both in its activity as well as its architecture. In contrast to classical, modernist engastration, which is about stuffing and filling, replacing nothing with something, speculative engastration is about opening up and emptying out. It is about framing and maintaining nothing until that nothing becomes palpably something. Like D&G's body without organs, speculative engastration provides our culinary adventurer with an unformed body of giving and thanksgiving that, beyond being finger-licking delicious, also, importantly, maintains an open hole, an open body cavity, not for the purposes of stuffing with stuffing, but rather as a site of open possibility, a point of rhizomatic departure that might lead our speculative gastronomer out into many possible lines of flight. This speculative engastration is the empty tomb from which Christ departs and does not return, nor do any of his apostles linger. This speculative engastration is the Christmas stocking left unstuffed. Not because of some naughty list, but because perhaps this stocking was made for walking. This speculative engastration, this body's inside body without organs, is the whole left unstuffed. Not because there was no stuffing available, surely not. No, this whole is left unstuffed because compared to the being of stuffing, the becoming of nothing is far more important. When to be or not to be are the only lame, calcified, spent to exhaustion questions, a maybe comes gobble-gobbling through the middle, soliciting us into an adventure to the unknown and the not yet. Speculative engastration is about placing animals inside other animals, but this placing action does not lead to filling and so to closure like modernist engastration. Rather, this engastration frames an infinite space within. For a speculative engastration is the radical culinary practice of placing larger bodies inside smaller bodies. In the case of speculative engastration, as one eats their way from outside to inside, one finds themselves within gastronomical architecture very different from classical engastrational architecture, which is based on a larger, harder, load-bearing exterior with a smaller, softer, and gooey interior stuffed to the hilt. Rather, the gastronomical architecture of speculative engastration is one where all is in all, where notions of outside and inside are made problematic, one that generatively folds and flexes, redefining notions of scale and how one bears one's load well. This is a gastronomical architecture that does not allow for a classical foundationalism that privileges building a house on rock versus building a house on sand. This is a gastronomical architecture that is weird, not weird in the pop culture sense of counter-normative, but a rich weirdness on the order of the Norse, where the end is the beginning, where up is down, where inside is out, and where rocks upon which one might build are superfluid, and foundational constructive considerations of these weird rocks are reckless and ill-advised, far less dependable and stable than sand. An inverted turducken, the king of kings of speculative engastration, is the premier move beyond the simple disorganization of body without organs and the most pristine example of the weird gastronomical architecture of speculative engastration. As with all speculative engastration, preparing an inverted turducken is of course not just a removal of things, of organs. It is also an adding of things that do not fit, an adding of things that do not add up. As with pebbles thrown into a body of water that causes that body to increase, though the actual volume of water stays the same, with the speculative engastrational inverted turducken, we have an additive process that makes the interior body cavity grow larger, though the body's exterior dimensions stay the same. A room, any room, is not its walls, right? Rather, it is the space between the walls, the space framed by the walls that is the room. A room needs its walls to be a room, of course, but a room needs room to be a room. So too, an inverted turducken, larger bodies stuffed inside smaller bodies, is not so much the chicken or the duck inside the chicken or the turkey inside the duck. Rather, it is the blessed action of building an impossible, edible architecture that makes possible an inner space that is infinite, active, and aromatic. An edible architecture that frames the outer edges of a space that has no outer edge. For a culinary adventurer to eat their way inward into any speculative engastration, as their spatial orientation expands outward in every dimension, even as their body descends, they find themselves standing in an infinite body cavity of open possibility, where anything could happen. And for the speculative gastronomer attempting to eat their way into an inverted turducken, anything always happens. Now, We have limited knowledge of the experience of entering inside an inverted turducken because no one has actually made it back out, either because they did not wish to make it back out — singularity events do tend to change one's value system — or were somehow unable to make it back out. However, through the harrowing bravery and selfless sacrificial actions of a few for the sake of science and speculative object theory, and through the use of pressure-resistant cameras and interdimensional wireless technology, we have recently started to cobble together some semblance of what transpires on the other side of this impossible, three-bodied, edible architecture. Here's what we know. As our fearless culinary adventurer eats her way inward through the three-bodied wall of the inverted turducken, she finds herself passing through a final thin membrane into an entirely new dimensional spacetime, an infinite body cavity that has the distinct aroma of sage, rosemary, and thyme. This body cavity is empty and endless, but yet strangely active and full. Not only is it active architecture, but the space inside the architecture, the negative space itself, is active. In this place, at the center of this turducken, standing full-bodied within this strange space, our culinary speculator finds herself eating while being eaten, chewing while being chewed. She eats without growing full, and is eaten without being consumed, eaten with no particular eater present. A potent anti-material, gastric fluid, the juice, slowly starts to soften her object edges as the turducken's infinite body cavity becomes increasingly full of absolute nothingness. No bones, no organs, just thick ontological singularity. As this infinite volume of viscous nothingness comes online, as it increasingly is a weird and super somethingness, made up of many somethings now mostly absent, it starts to activate into unified, dynamic, synchronized actions, actions of floating, phasing, fluctuating, and folding. This empty space no longer has any space, a room with no room. At least space according to classical understandings of empty space, occupied by what might appear to be a soupy something, a kind of liquid. But this is a weird liquid, with motor agency and seeming responsivity, that playfully recedes any time our speculative gastronomer tries to touch it. Until, of course, she realizes that she is it, receding as she goes. As our fearless gastronomer loses her edges, while somehow remaining solidly still herself, a quiet peacefulness sets in. A peacefulness that couldn't be further from that old modernist rag, peaciness we were talking about earlier. For she finds herself deep inside a thing that is decidedly not comfort food. That old school comfort food that produces the warm feelings of peaciness, right? No, she finds herself deep inside a discomfort food that ushers in a hard-won peace, a discomfort food that has simultaneously annihilated her, what she used to be at any rate, and has ushered her into a life beyond the grave. She has been born again into some new holy communion. She is the communion, even as she partakes in the communion. She has become the new bread and new wine in a post-bread and wine world. For though we think of bread and wine as stable things, as products of yeast and fermentation, bread and wine are never stable. They're always on the move, always in perpetual states of becoming. There, in this place, she is present and vast. In her quietest moments, she can hear faint sounds, sounds that gurgle, sounds that whoosh. Perhaps occasionally the sound of a chirp or even a chortle or a far-off guffaw can be heard. What was hard to hear at first is now easy as she is acclimatized to this deep state of oneness and quiet rest. She recognizes these sounds heard are actually strange sounds of thanks being given and received. Sounds that reverberate as if in collective chorus across this contracting and expanding sacred non-space. This non-space of which she herself is now intimately and inextricably a part. These sounds of thanks, these whooshes and gurgles and occasional chirps, are sounds that perform uplift, even as they fail to echolocate the outer edges of this, her new and strange estate. The inverted turducken and other speculative machines are the kinds of things that we at the Marcel Mauss hermeneutical think tank are exploring. For more information on the MMHTT, please visit us at brenteverettdickinson.com. Thank you very much.